Hello and welcome back to After This Sports Podcast. I'm again joined by Jonathan, and what are we? Week five now, entering week five. The
Yeah,
season flying. We've had some highlights, we've had some lowlights, depending on how you look at these recent coaching firings. But I want to start with that because we could talk about the games. I thought this weekend of games was not as good as the last few weekends, but still stuff you can take away. The main thing for me is some of these teams are really heading in the wrong direction. Georgia Tech decides to finally stop heading in the wrong direction. They fired Jeff Collins, um, who's I'm trying to come up with good accolades for him, but he was so bad for them that people forget that Georgia Tech's an actual at one point was an actual top tier job.
yeah, and of course, they were a top tier job when they were running the triple option, and I think the reason that Collins lasted the length he did was because it is tough to transition from a triple option style to a spread offense, and I think he was the university wanted to give him time to see if he could do so because they knew it was going to be a longer process than just hiring a normal head coach, but it was a disaster for a team that actually isn't that untalented. Like they have some pieces.
Yeah, I mean, he was just not getting anywhere with that team. Um, we talked about this in Nebraska. I mean, I feel like we should do this every coaching hire.
Hmm.
But who do you, if you're the Georgia Tech AD, who are you trying to target here? Like, who's the home run hire? Who's the realistic hire? And who's the oh no, I'm going to stop my donations to the university hire?
See, I haven't thought about it too much because this wasn't obvious for me like Nebraska was, but Georgia Tech isn't an awful job. Like they're in a really good recruiting base, the state of Georgia. Of course, it's going to be really tough to get players from Kirby Smart, but they do have talent in that state, and a lot of it. It's one of the best football states in the entire country. I guess your usual the first thing that pops up is the usual suspects: Matt Campbell, Leipold, Matt Rule, like the guys you would think of that are I guess next up to get big head coaching jobs. Um, I like Urban Meyer is just I think would be a disaster of a hire anywhere, just because he brings baggage with him. Plus, I don't know if he's gonna be able to recover from what happened in Jacksonville. Like that was just so bad. And
By the way, Jacksonville, we don't talk about NFL on here, but how bad is Urban Meyer of a coach? The fact that Jacksonville's coming out here now, they're 2-1, they're looking really good.
yeah, college coaches going to the NFL is always a huge question mark. And like I think you're all definitely a lot safer if you're hiring from the college level. Even though he didn't work, I think hiring a guy like Matt Rule, who is a defensive coach, and is probably the safer option because I feel like defense, at least at the college level, will translate better to the NFL than offense does.
Would
And
yeah, would Matt Rule take that job?
at Georgia Tech,
Yeah, because I don't think he would.
I mean, I envision him taking a job, but
But he could get a better job. There's gonna
Auburn
be
is going to
openings.
be open, and if it's between Auburn and Georgia Tech, Auburn is very clearly the better job.
I think prime time is the option here. I think this is
Yeah,
the Deion Sanders job. I think they
well,
need because listen, if you don't have the pizzazz, you're not gonna compete with Georgia in the slightest. And you know what? Everyone is recruiting Georgia. That's where the talent is. And Georgia Tech needs someone who can fend off some of those outsiders. And I mean, I think Sanders would be a really solid fit for the ACC versus any other conference. I don't think he'd do well in the SEC. I don't think he'd do well anywhere
I
else.
agree.
Um,
He'd also bring in a really good transfer class through one, and they get some talent in right away.
and I think he'd bring in a really solid staff. Honestly, I think he would. His staff at Jacksonville State, it's pretty solid.
Yeah, and I know you're gonna hate me for this comment, but I'm not sure how much waiting around Deion Sanders can do because I mean ideally he went to Florida State and that would be his job if that opened up, but Florida State's playing good football right now, so Well, I'm not sure how
I
much
still
weighting
I
you
still
give
think
on
he
that.
gets I still think he's gonna get the Florida State job eventually. I just think that more in the short term, this would be a solid um challenge for him, or maybe like a prove it. Like, okay,
Yeah,
prove it. Georgia
you're
Tech,
you're winning
very
somewhere that's
low
not Jackson State.
expectations.
Yeah, you're
Very,
winning
very
somewhere
low
that's not.
expectations. To me, this
And
is
like,
Deion Sanders' job.
and you can win in the coastal, like absolutely.
Plus, Georgia, like, dude, he's got so much connections in Georgia. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
to me, this job is meant for him. And if I'm the Georgia Tech AD, I'm calling up Rule. I'm calling up um, Urban Meyer. I'm not getting him, but the next call is Deion Sanders.
yeah, I think that's fair. I like thing is like I don't know like what college job or like what college coach would like geographically make sense. Like I guess you could call some of these ACC guys that have done a pretty good job at other schools, like a
Yeah,
Dave
but
Clawson and like
you
a
have,
Dave Doran, but like
you have to get a guy from a lower level, in my opinion. Because like,
yeah,
look, is Wake Forest that much in modern football, in like the current landscape of college football, is Wake Forest that much worse of a job than Georgia Tech?
not at the moment, but like I think the ceiling is way higher. But like here's the
I mean,
thing,
I don't know. Like, you
like
don't have to play
it's
Georgia
not
every
like
year.
it's not like it's Georgia Tech isn't a school that's like missing out on talent because they had a coach that couldn't recruit. They're missing
Oh,
out on talent because there's another program in their state that's way better than
there's
them.
enough talent in Georgia for them to get theirs. Because
Mhm.
and you know how I know that? Because look at Alabama, look at Ohio State, look at Texas, look at those classes, and tell me where those players are coming from.
Yeah, I mean a lot of them are from Georgia. Like Trevor
So,
Lawrence was
so
from
Georgia Tech doesn't need to
Georgia.
get every Georgia commit. They don't need to get every Alabama commit, but they can't let that one Georgia kid go to Penn State or go to Michigan or go to Texas or go to USC.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
yeah, no, absolutely.
So I think prime time would be at least like fun to see at that job, because that job has zero swag. It's got zero. There's nothing electric about that job currently. Like
And
I
like
think they could have
they,
that.
they have some talent right now. Like they're fifth in the ACC in college team talent rankings. Like they're not like this team that they have that they're putting on the field every week should not be playing as bad as they have been.
Yeah, I agree.
Jeff Sims is good. I like Jeff Sims.
Okay, let's move on to some of like the bigger results we saw from last week. I want to start with Maryland and Michigan. It was a 12 o'clock game.
Yeah,
I told you that I think I said on this podcast that I thought Maryland was going to play them close, and they did. And Michigan struggled a little bit offensively. Um, they won the game. They should have won by 2 touchdowns. That last touchdown came in like the final 20 seconds, but I'm not that worried about what Michigan did. I'm more so impressed with how Maryland played. I thought
yeah,
that they had zero penalties, by the way. And that was what we talked about in their game against SMU. They had 13 penalties.
yeah.
And so, like, if
I,
this, yeah, I can do.
yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think that like I came away and like after the game, I go and look at the box score, and JJ throws for 220 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, great, like this is going to be JJ's worst game the rest of the year probably, and this would be one of Cade's better games as a college quarterback. So I came away particularly impressed with how Michigan's offense was able to flow in the second half, particularly once they got going. They were really slow out of the gate, but I think their defense is going to continue to get better every week, and their offense. I can't imagine they're going to play that bad the rest of the year, even against some of these upper echelon Big Ten teams.
Yeah. And also, I think that we look at Tualia, kind of like his MO is he's been a really good quarterback, and he's got a ton of talent. It's just the turnovers kill him. I think he threw 2 picks this game. And you just wonder, like, if Maryland can just put it together, and if Tualia can just have a clean game, and the whole team just doesn't have penalties or doesn't have lapses on the special teams, like they could beat good teams in the Big Ten. And I still have them ranked in my top 25 because I do think that they're, in terms of like how they're playing right now, I think they're playing like a top 25 team.
They're very deservingly 7-point favorites against Michigan State this week. Very
I
deserving.
want to talk about Michigan State because we can't let
And
that slide.
just real quick, like for the people that like want to like dog Michigan for this game, because like I did see some people do that. Maryland starts two receivers who are higher ranked recruiting wise than any receiver that Michigan could put on the field right now. So like let's like kind of pump the brakes on Michigan because Maryland is a good team. Now, I don't have them in my top 25, which I'm sure we'll get into because I just think that there are 25 teams that are better than them, but there are also more than 25 good teams in college football right now.
Yeah, and like I just want to make a note in terms of like the box score and what happened in the game. Michigan rushed for 243 yards, 6.1 yards per carry, whereas Maryland rushed for 128 yards, 3.8 yards per carry.
Hmm.
Maryland passed for 270 yards. Michigan passed for 220 yards. So like, I mean, altogether, like this game was close, but I mean, it seemed like Michigan controlled the game the entire time.
Yeah,
From the get go.
I was never worried about Michigan losing that game. Not one bit.
Um, let's talk about Michigan State because second week in a row, they've looked maybe like the worst passing defense in college football, which if you remember, that was also their case last year.
Yeah.
And if you also remember, what did Mel Tucker coach at Georgia? Coach the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
So
Concerning.
very concerning, and it's not concerning for me as much as a fan, but it's concerning for the guys paying the $91 million left over on Mel Tucker's contract.
Mm-hmm. And like I think they're gonna be fine. Not this year, but like down the line, I think they'll be fine. Like Michigan State, like if they're the third best program in the Big Ten East and fourth or fifth best Big Ten program overall, like that's where they should be. Like, they're not a better program than Michigan. They're not a better program than Ohio State. They're not a better program than Penn State.
Yeah,
So
I'm just worried the fact of like the way that they've lost some of these games. I'm pretty sure
I mean they've been embarrassed twice.
Mel Tucker's score differential against Big Ten opponents is I think like negative 81 points maybe.
Was that just last year or
I think that's including this year too. So including the two blowouts.
so does that
including
includes all
Minnesota. It's not including Washington though. Not including Washington.
Okay, but does that include his first year in the conference as well?
The 2020 year, yes.
Okay, because I was gonna say like last year, like Michigan State won a lot of games, but their point differential in the Big Ten had to be close because Ohio State beat them by 55. So,
yeah, and the games that they won, they only won by like a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean they beat Nebraska by 3 in overtime. They beat Michigan by 1 score. They didn't beat Penn State by very much. So
my biggest gripe with that program, and again, like of course I'm gonna sound like a salty Michigan fan because like I'm gonna try to take this as objective as possible, but is there a chance to blame kind of the roster construction, the transfer mercenary strategy? Because I was reading a lot on Twitter. It's like, oh, wait till Mel Tucker gets his guys as upperclassmen, or like wait till he like gets his recruiting class to be like upperclassmen. I said, wait a minute, didn't he just process all of his guys and bring in all these mercenaries who obviously aren't playing at a great level? Because I mean, they brought in 3 guys in their secondary, and their secondary is terrible.
yeah, and Amir Speed was the big one there,
Yeah.
and he's not been great. But
And so that's my question. It's like, okay, if you're gonna say give him time, let him get his guys in, is he ever gonna even have that chance if he keeps bringing in these transfers like he's been doing?
like
Years?
I think the way it should work, because this is college football, not college basketball, and it's completely different in college basketball. But transfers, I think, in college football should be used to fill gaps.
Exactly.
Now, like, if you need a transfer quarterback, different story. But if you're replacing guys on defense and you don't think you have guys ready next year or like on the offensive line, transfers should be filled to use gaps. You shouldn't be making up a team of transfers because, like, my mindset is if you're bringing in like half a defense of transfers to start for you, it's basically like hiring a defensive coordinator that's running a different system. The guys all have to come in and learn exactly what to do, and you're going to be really slow out of the gate. Do I think Michigan State's going to be this bad the entire year? Probably not. And their schedule actually gets much easier in the second half after the Michigan game. But these guys look right now like they've never played in the system, and that's exactly the case.
Yeah, again though, like isn't there a problem with, okay, you recruit this kid, it's a Mel Tucker kid, okay,
Yeah,
he is a freshman, doesn't play, and as a sophomore, they bring in guys who are either grad transfers or upperclassmen out of the transfer portal to come in, and that's like that player might have played that year or at least gotten better. So like even
yeah,
though they might not have been very good, they would have had a guy who can get experience and hopefully be a part of something, a better season the next year. So like
yeah. And I mean, like that's kind of like what I'm a fan of. Like in college football, like you have to play your players at some point. Like
exactly.
because like you said, like not only are the like you not like taking a chance on a guy who probably got better from his freshman to sophomore to junior year, but like if this becomes a trend, you're going to start losing kids, and you're not going to be able to get kids out of high school. And these freshmen that you have that you bring in, they're going to start transferring because they see what's happening to these kids ahead of them.
Yeah, for every Kenneth Walker, there's two or three guys who are just Jags, just a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the case with transfers. It's been the case for transfers, especially on the not at the quarterback position. Because if these guys couldn't get reliable starting time on their past teams, like what makes you think that they're gonna become something different when they transfer?
I mean, yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I also just like I know we've said this a billion times, but like Michigan State just didn't have very much talent last year, and they won a lot of close games, and like that you can't win close. You can't just continuously win close games. Like that's just not how it works.
Yeah, but
Like
you can continuously lose close games.
there is a variance part of this sport.
Yep. Let's move on. Let's talk about a game that went to the final, two overtimes actually. Clemson against Wake Forest. Very interesting game. I tuned in a little bit at the end because I was at the Michigan game, so I saw a little bit of the last overtime.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch more of this game?
Yeah, I watched it wire to wire.
Okay,
So
so can you tell me how DJ played? Because I'm looking at stats: 26 for 41, 371, and 5 touchdowns. What was that like though?
I mean, he looked as good as the box score will tell you. Like the thing is, like we've always known the arm talent was there. This was the week that like we saw him put that arm talent together. Like he was hitting deep shots, like guys in perfect stride. He was throwing these 50-50 balls in just really good spots. And like Clemson doesn't have a ton of receivers that separate really well. And like Wake Forest was playing a lot of guys that were backups because they were really banged up in their secondary. But like their pass rush was getting home, and like he didn't have like all day, but DJ was just he was taking advantage of mismatches and putting the ball in the right spot. I
Yeah,
thought
so
Will Shipley was excellent again for them.
Will Shipley is very, very, very good.
Mm-hmm.
I also noticed like he was I mean, dude, 20 carries, 104 yards, 5.2 average, had a long 53-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I
I mean,
mean
we got to
they
remember
finally gave him the ball.
when you look at all these offensive stats for Clemson, you have to remember that this offensive line is not good.
No, it's
I'm not
not.
even saying that by Clemson standards. It's an average unit in college football.
Mm-hmm.
You can question kind of like that development because they have recruited guys at the spot. So like that's not the issue. But Wake Forest, as it seems from what I've heard from you, is that like Wake Forest was still able to get a ton of pressure. Um,
Yeah, and just like I think that at least offensively for Wake Forest, like for those of you that don't know and like didn't see the game because Wake Forest just isn't on national TV very much, Wake Forest offense is like it's like very simple but very complicated at the same time. They run this like these RPO stuff, but they hold the ball in the running back's arms forever. Like it's like crazy. Like their running plays were not doing much, but they would just hold the ball there so long that like
is that is
it
that
can
that Tua is that that Tua Dolphins offense?
yeah, but it's like so slow and so annoying because like they'll literally just like Hartman will take the snap, he'll sit there with the ball in the running back's gut for like 3 seconds, and then because he's like sitting there with it, the safeties can't really move anywhere because they don't know whether the ball is going to the running back or not.
Yeah.
And that allows these wide receivers for Wake Forest, who are very good, by the way, to get down the sideline and get these one-on-one matchups. And Clemson's secondary and corners were just not very good.
Are you like a little bit nervous about Clemson after this game?
No, because I think they proved that they can win um games multiple ways. Like I think Dabo, if I'm Dabo Swinney, I'm a lot happier winning that game 51-45 than I am winning it 17-13 because we already know they can win like that. But
Yeah.
I think DJ was very encouraging, and I think that's exactly what you want, like a game that you needed out of him. You ran the ball great again, and I think that at least for the corners, their corners are talented, no doubt about it. But they were really struggling. But you're not going to see an offense that complicated the rest of the year in the ACC at least. Like
Yeah.
they play NC State this week. NC State doesn't do anything like that. Florida State, who's been great offensively this year, does not do anything like that. So I think that once you play against these concepts and against these offensive styles that are a lot more simple than what Wake Forest does, I think they'll be just fine on D.
Yep. Okay, I want to move into our rankings, and because this also gives us the ability to kind of like go through game by game what we saw from different teams. So
Yeah.
um, I'll start as always. Got Georgia number one. I haven't changed them. I have noticed though that Georgia has been moved in some other rankings. So
Mhm.
you talk about that a little bit, but Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State killed Wisconsin. Not even close. Classic Ohio State. Michigan, Clemson, to round it out. So I got the same top five. I agree with you on the Clemson front.
Mhm.
Uh, I still think that they're very very good, and I was actually really impressed to see their offense show up like they did. Because
Yeah.
I mean I don't think their defense plays like that all the time, and we've seen their defense be dominant. We haven't really seen their offense move the ball like that.
Yeah. So my top five, I had a couple changes actually. Put Alabama back at one. So those rankings you were talking about, that's mine, and also a couple analytical polls. So Alabama one, Georgia two, Ohio State three, Michigan four, Clemson five. So let me explain the Alabama and Georgia switch first. I think Georgia, what they did against Kent State this weekend is like actually inexcusable. Like I was looking at some stuff after the games, yes, on Saturday, just at night, and Georgia, I think, gave up 5.4 yards of play to Kent State on Saturday. Alabama gave up 5.5 yards of play to Texas. So only a zero point 0.1 yard difference per play between those two. And I think that again, like we have to like reward and punish teams for how they played. And Georgia played freaking terrible on Saturday against the Kent State team that I guess you can call them battle tested because they played Washington and Oklahoma. But I mean, for a number one team coming out and doing that on defense after what they've done the past couple weeks is inexcusable. Like you can talk about like Georgia has this unbelievably high standard on defense now, but like even like a normal like Power Five team playing against Kent State, that was like an atrocious game defensively for them.
Yeah,
And
and
then
I mean,
Ohio State looked just too impressive to keep it four behind Michigan.
yeah, I mean, I get that sentiment, but I'm also looking back on. I'm weighting all these weeks fairly the same in terms of what they did because we've only had a few games, and so again, that's one piece. That Kent State game is not their best. That's one piece of the puzzle, but the overwhelming piece of the puzzle is the games beforehand, especially the game against Oregon, where they made them look like a MAC team. They did to Oregon what they should have done to Kent State.
Yeah.
And so like that's why I can't move them down. Because while like they didn't play as well, they were still to me, they were still really far ahead of everyone else. And so this does close the gap, but it doesn't close the gap enough.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, I got my sixth team. I got USC, which I also want to talk about because I haven't been on as high as USC, as high on USC as you, and they didn't play all that well this weekend. They only beat Oregon State. By the way, Oregon State, who I said in our Pac-12 preview a while back, I said this was going to be a very good team. They only won by 3. It was all like super late at night, so like I didn't watch it, but and I assume a lot of the AP voters watched it. Uh, I'm not alarmed though. Again, I'm looking at talent. One piece of the puzzle. They've looked really solid all year, and I also didn't know who to even put at that spot. So I'm sticking with USC as 6.
After 5, it gets tough.
Yeah, I got Utah at 7. I haven't moved on to. I don't think I've moved them at all this year. I think I've kept them at 7 the entire year. I've got Tennessee at 8. Big win over the weekend against a really overrated Florida team. Um, it was a close, like it got close at the end, but Tennessee was the much better team. Like Hendon Hooker was really good. The offense is fun to watch, and I was actually very impressed with their defense against Anthony Richardson. We have Oregon at 9. Again, I don't think I moved them. Then Penn State at 10. So a lot of these teams have just moved up due to the fact that I've moved other teams down. But that kind of rounds out my top 10.
All right, so my top 10, I have Utah at 6. Excuse me, Minnesota at 7, which is higher than anyone else has them ranked in the country. 8 USC, 9 Tennessee, 10 Penn State. To add to your point about USC, I did move them down a couple spots, and I forget whether it was 2 or I think it was I moved them down 2 spots, but Oregon State is good. I'm going to give some credit there, but at the same time, I think that it's safe to assume that USC isn't going to continue to turn teams over at the rate that they have been. And when they stop doing so, they're probably going to slip up somewhere. And so I think this team is still probably closer to the 10th best team in the country than they are to being a college football playoff team.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. I noticed we have Penn State at 10th, and
Yeah.
again, I don't want to overreact too much to that Auburn win a few weeks ago because it was very impressive, but like we've seen a little bit more of Auburn, and now I
Yeah.
think
I
we're all
mean,
a little bit more skeptical.
we played them this weekend. They're awful. Like
You
they're
guys, you
terrible.
guys almost beat, you guys almost beat them.
We should have. We
You
should have.
should have beat them.
We should have missed. We missed a 26-yard field goal at the end of regulation,
Yep.
and our running back fumbled in the end zone in overtime to win the
Yep.
game.
I
So
want to hear your opinion on this because I assume you have some information. But Luther Burden, what's his deal right now?
I don't think he's going anywhere. At least not for the moment. Like athletes take stuff out of their bio and post these cryptic messages all the time. Like he's a freaking 18-year-old kid who was the number 1 wide receiver in the country. Like he's just a little bit of a hothead. Like so are a lot of freshmen. So like I think it'll be just fine. He was posting stuff about his teammates today, like good things. Like Dominic Lovett's leading the SEC in receiving right now, and Luther posted something like hyping him up. So I think it's just fine.
Then I don't think we've talked about Mizzou as much on this podcast with you. And like I
I
would
mean,
like to
what is there to talk about? Like
like drink in, drink out. Like what's the
out.
drink out? So is that another job to like
So here's my theory. He has a really good sophomore class and a really good freshman class. He can't call plays, and he's been doing it for the last 2 and now I guess a third year. So I think that he's going to get one more year after this, and I think what like the way that we need to look at this as fans and both like the athletic department is let drink let drinks guys get older and get more experience, and while this team continues to get better personnel wise, I think that he needs to figure out what is going on and what's wrong and fix it. And part of that is hiring an offensive coordinator, which, because let me tell you, this offense, so watching it is just miserable. Like it's way too much east west. Like they're not very creative at all. And over under 1.5 wins in the SEC probably.
wow. It's pretty depressing. That's a fairly depressing note.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, like, and like the thing is, like, on the recruiting note, this 2023 class that he has is not good. So unless this picks up before signing day, like, he's not really stringing together like these elite classes. So
okay, we got to get back on track a little bit here. So I'll continue off my rankings. I got Oklahoma at 11. I wasn't sure to put them because they did lose to Kansas State, but again, this is also for my preseason conference rankings, but like Kansas State, I said was going to be a dark horse for the Big 12. And I mean, they lost to Tulane, but they're still very, very good.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that game just a little bit because Adrian Martinez was amazing, like an NFL quarterback, amazing.
Yeah,
And we've seen this. We've seen Adrian Martinez look amazing. And then like the next game, he throws 3 interceptions. They lose to Tulane. Like, I, is we can talk about that a little bit because I rank Kansas State. So like I'll have them. Or did I?
yeah, I did too.
Yeah. So we can talk about that later. But I don't know. Like I didn't punish Oklahoma that much, even though I probably should have because they did lose at home. But I mean, Kansas State always beats Oklahoma. So
Yeah, I think Oklahoma will be just fine. My thoughts are more with Kansas State in this one because like they're everything that we thought they were going to be and probably more. Like
yeah.
the loss to Tulane was bad, but it was also a look ahead game. So I give them the benefit of the doubt there. I think it's probably safe to say that Adrian Martinez not only won the Nebraska divorce, but he took Scott Frost's possessions with him in the divorce. So, I mean, I have Kansas State ranked at 25. This is a good team. I think you're absolutely right about them being a Big 12 dark horse. And they are much closer to the way they looked against Mizzou and Oklahoma than they are to the team they were against Tulane.
I got Minnesota at 12. I'm finally hopping on the bandwagon a little bit. They look incredible. PJ Fleck, row the boat, ski Yuma, all of the above. Um, they're actually they're just really good.
Yeah.
Until further notice, they have to be your pick in the Big Ten West.
Yeah, and I mean all the Big Ten West games are at the end of the year, but Iowa has to play Michigan and Wisconsin, or Michigan and Ohio State. Wisconsin already lost to Ohio State, so like Minnesota has already won a Big Ten East game, so they are already at an advantage. So
Exactly.
and like I can't see anyone else winning that division besides those three, and Wisconsin hasn't looked great. I think like Iowa has historically had Minnesota's number, so I'm a little worried about that one. But
Yep.
and I still don't think Iowa is that bad, but I think Minnesota is the clear favorite in the West right now.
Yep. I've got Washington at 13, Baylor 14, Arkansas 15. Only thing that's a little bit interesting there is keeping Arkansas in the top 15. They lost over the weekend. I think they should have won that game, to be honest.
They outplayed them severely.
They're the better team. I can't move them down. I mean, I still like Washington, still like Baylor. That it's just stayed the same. Until I see another team that looks that caliber, I can't move them down.
All right. So my next group of teams, I have Washington at 11, Oklahoma at 12, Oregon at 13, and then I have LSU and Florida State back to back at 14 and 15. So a couple things here. Washington continues to impress me a lot. Their passing offense is, I think it's fair to say, one of the best 10 passing offenses in the country. They have a tough one at UCLA this weekend. It's on a Friday, which always scares me. But if they get through this one, I told you last week they're in the clear until they play Oregon. So, but just an interesting little note about Washington there, who continues to listen. I told one of my friends to bet them plus 800 to win the Pac-12 last week because I thought it was incredible value, and he was looking for a future conference bet. And I think with the way the schedule plays out, they probably got a pretty decent shot at it. I still am very high on LSU. I think they're going to roll Auburn this week, and then they get into a stretch where I believe they have Tennessee at home and a game at Ole Miss in there before the bye. I still think LSU can be like 7-1 going into the Bama game, which is pretty incredible considering they'll be coming off a bye and have Bama at home. They continue to get better every week. Their offensive line continues to play better. Dylan, they give up 2 first downs against New Mexico, 2 in 4 quarters.
That's absurd.
And then Florida State at 15, who I know we have our difference of opinions on, but they blew out Boston College. Travis is healthy. They continue to play well on both sides of the ball. I texted you earlier today. Clemson last week was a 7-point favorite at Wake Forest. Florida State's a 7-point favorite this week at home against Wake Forest. So I think when Florida State plays them, I believe it's a week from Saturday. The spread's going to be a lot closer than people want to admit.
Yeah, man. Florida State, and I think it's funny how our opinions on these teams are because like I remember in the offseason, I was very adamant that Florida State was at least better than Miami. And
And they are.
and then they are, by the way. But like I remember you were disagreeing a little bit with that. But like I, I like Florida State and I love Jordan Travis. Like don't take my not putting them in my top 25 as somebody that says Jordan Travis isn't like one of the best quarterbacks in college football because I don't think that's true. I think he's very much like a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the ACC. But with that being said, I still think I need to see a little bit more out of that team because like if you go through their wins, yes, they've beaten some really tough teams, but there are still like some major question marks I think need to be answered. So like when I see that, I'm fine with it. But I think the teams that they played have had like severe deficiencies, even though like some of the teams are good, like LSU, like those teams have had severe like deficiencies that kind of aligned really well with Florida State. So this isn't, I'm not trying to knock them. I'm not trying to say that they aren't deserving of the spot. I just didn't have them as highly rated in the preseason. So like until I see something overwhelming, I can't break them into this tier.
Would a cover against Wake Forest like be overwhelming enough
I would rank them.
this week? Because they're 7-point favorites, like
Yeah,
significant.
if they cover that, I would rank them.
So yeah, Florida State's secondary is probably a little better than Clemson, so I doubt they'll have as tough of a time guarding them with that complex offense.
Yeah.
We'll see though, because we have different opinions on Norvell, and Dave Clawson at Wake Forest is a good coach, so it's a good opportunity for them.
Yeah. Let's continue on. I got Ole Miss at 16. I've got Kentucky at 17, Oklahoma State 18, A&M 19, Texas 20. I hate this tier. This is just a tier of teams who I think can eventually get there. I can't put anyone else ahead of them.
I have Arkansas at 16, Kentucky at 17, BYU at 18, Baylor at 19, and Texas at 20. I still think Texas is really good. I think it was a really bad spot for them, considering it was probably the last time that Texas Tech gets Texas at home in the conference. I don't get the hype with Kentucky, man. I'm not sold. They haven't looked the part. I thought even against Florida, like Florida probably outplayed them, and then they go out and they don't play very well against a not so good Northern Illinois team. They just really haven't done anything to impress me, and I think they're getting a lot of credit for a win against Florida that really doesn't look that great. Doesn't look as good, I should say, 2 weeks later.
Yeah. Let's continue on. I've got LSU 21, Kansas State 22, the newest edition. And I would be surprised if they don't keep climbing up these rankings. And I have Maryland at 23 again. Like I actually moved them up from last week. I thought they played well enough for me to move them. Like I thought they were actually better than what I saw from them last week. And I think that they're going to beat Michigan State next week. And I don't think it's going to be close.
I agree.
I've got Pitt at 24, and I got Kansas at 25. I don't want to spend too much time with the Kansas because, I mean, I will say like I put them there to kind of like mess with you a little bit, but like I have no problem putting a 3-0 team over Power 5 opponents, like in my rankings.
Yeah, I just like the FPI has them at 55, Sagarin at 49. I just like can't get behind it yet. Like if they beat Iowa State, like you might this week, you might be able to talk me into it a little. Although, like I think here's my promise to the people who listen to this podcast: if Kansas beats Iowa State and TCU, both of them are at home. If Kansas beats Iowa State and TCU, I will rank them. Promise. But their defense has been really bad, and as good as their offense has been, Kansas is going to be an outright dog in every single game they play the rest of the year, at least in the regular season. So I just like I'm not there with them yet. My 21 through 25, the Ole Miss looked really bad this weekend. But I still have a lot high hope for them as they looked good the week prior. So Ole Miss 21, Oklahoma State 22. We'll get to see them in the spotlight against Baylor this week. Pitt 23. I was very hesitant about this, but North Carolina State's at 24 for me. I feel like the way they've played the last 2 weeks, they kind of deserved it. And then Kansas State at 25. But like the thing with North Carolina State is like I think they're going to get manhandled this week against Clemson. And I know they were kind of the trendy college football playoff pick in the preseason. They're not that. They're not making the playoff. They're going to lose to Clemson this week, and if not, I promise you, they're not going to finish the regular season undefeated. They're not good enough. I think that their defense is solid, and I think they've showed that the last 2 weeks. But Clemson just has way better players, and this is kind of a game where just like now, not only is it a Clemson revenge game, but like this is a game where you just like you're sitting down and like at the end of the game, you just like look at yourself and like recruiting matters like way more than like people realize sometimes.
Yeah, could we talk about the fact that our composite rankings don't have NC State ranked, and then NC State is ranked what 10th on the AP poll?
Um,
I don't think NC State's ranked in ours.
no, 23. They're at 23, but like
they barely make it in.
still like they're probably not in if I don't rank them at 24. So
Probably.
that's probably on me, guys. Actually, like here's the thing, and this is another. I can find a way to complain about the AP poll like every week, like multiple times, but like North Carolina State plays 2 good games against the Texas Tech team, who I think is solid, not great, and a UConn team who is one of the worst teams in the FBS. And they play those 2 games, and other teams lose because their schedules are way harder. And we all just all of a sudden forget that North Carolina State should be 3-1, and they should have lost to East Carolina. Like this team is not great. They're fine. They're probably the 3rd or 4th best team in the ACC Atlantic, which is a good division. But like they're the 4th or 5th best team in the ACC. Like, what are we doing here? Like,
Yeah, I don't. I've been very outspoken about NC State. Like, we'll see. We'll see. Like, I really hope that they show up this weekend just to make it a better game.
returning players have to be good for returning players to matter. And like
It's a fake measurement.
like
Every
you know
year,
that
it's like, oh, they're returning their entire offensive line, but like that offensive line ranked in like what, like the 40th best unit. Like that's what I don't like about these preseason stuff. And we've had enough games to see who's good and who's not at this point.
Yeah.
Like in some
and like
capacity.
like you know who returned good starters? Utah, Minnesota. Like those teams return good players. NC State really didn't.
Yep. All right. I think that's gonna wrap it up for now. Some like solid recap. I think this week we're gonna try to record a best bets pod maybe on Friday. So stay on the lookout for that.
We are real quick before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
This time next week we'll be talking about a new coach being fired, and that's Brian Harsin. So
can we make it like an every week occurrence?
dude,
I might need to like edit in like an alarm or something, like a coaching alert. Like
I promise you guys that like I can, if I was the commissioner of college football, I can find you a coach to fire every week.
Probably. I can find 2 or 3.
And week 6, it's gonna be Jimbo Fisher. So
just stop. They can't, dude. They're gonna pay him like what, $30 million to leave. His buyout's incredible.
They can his buyout after week 6 can be $1 million for every point they lose to Alabama by.
Oh my god. Oh yeah. Let's gonna wrap it up. Thanks for listening. See y'all next week.